Outreach and Adoption Working Group. Thank you for hitting the recording. My thanks to the co-chairs, Mickey Lindlar and Daphne Lynn, for their support, and our speaker today, Beth, is joining us as well. We have Anu is another individual who's going to join us, but unfortunately, she is not well today, so Mickey is supporting that effort. You were prompted to take a poll when you joined, and I hope that you did, because that'll help us understand how to best staff the breakout groups as we go forward. So thank you very much for taking care of that. All right. Now, I want to welcome all of the new members, hoping that if you haven't been a part of this group, that you'll consider joining it. And if you're not a part of this group and aren't a part of RDA, we want you to do that as well. So please make sure to follow the community rules and engage. Okay, so first let's talk a little bit about the working group, okay? So RDA, WDS Trust Working Group, Principals Outreach and Adoption Working Group started to clarify the relationship between the trust principles, the certification processes, and all the metrics and other principle frameworks that are out there. There's a couple of different items. Again, I'm going to share with you the initial, pardon me, my window just moved. The initial article that led to this, but also the working group website. So I certainly welcome you to engage and be a part of that conversation. For this, we also have a bit of an agenda, if you will. So we're going to have principles use case. So we collected use cases and conversations about the different principles: care, fair, trust, as the three. We unfortunately, our folks from care are not able to join us today, but they did send some slides, and we'll have a brief conversation about that. EOSC Eden, so this is a trustworthy services use case. So again, we have another services perspective and lens. And then Beth, thank you so much for being with us today from the Digital Repository of Ireland. She will share a repositories use case involving trust. Then we're going to get into the meat of the conversation, and this is breaking out into the working groups. Are you new to the trust principles? What do you want to know? How can the trust principles help you? Where would you like for this to go next? And then some community feedback on the different deliverables we have available. We do need individuals to contribute to those conversations, take notes. It can be more than one person. But we'll also need to be able to give a summary at the end, and then we'll talk about next steps and closing. So that's our agenda for today. So I want to thank you all for that. And let's start with a bit of an overview. So what is trust? The trust principles: transparency, responsibility, user focus, sustainability, and technology. This all wraps around data repositories and obviously services as well. And we're really not looking at trust principles being a criteria for certification. It is really how the repositories can demonstrate their trustworthiness to users. So, and that could be actually stakeholders as well. So think about it. Your funders want to know that you're trustworthy and you're holding your data well. Policymakers, your users, and the reuse as well. So first, we're going to go through our use cases. So we will start with care, and I want to give a shout out to a summit that they are hosting. And part of this challenge of them not being able to be here today is because of that summit that they're working very heavily on. I want to thank Riley, who was very engaged and actually spoke to us. She had shared these slides with us. Maui Hudson, joined Riley, Ten Fong, Stephanie Carroll, and Andrew Martinez. They could all not be here today, but they did share these with us, and they wanted us to really look at this article and share this is an example of their case care principles and a use case, if you will, with earth sciences data repositories. So the citations there, I certainly want you to look through that and see the information that you should be familiar with this. There's a lot of names on that article that you're probably aware of already. We also have information to share that includes, oh, pardon me, their slides. So they spoke to the working group in 2024, and Riley was critical in having this conversation with us. And I wanted to highlight this one slide specifically that they gave. And you'll have access to the presentation and the slides to look at further. But they, and it was in development at the time, and the other article references this as well. They really mapped out where care and trust align together. So if you think of care as that collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics, um, transparency falls under the first two and a little bit in the ethics as well. You've got your responsibility under authority to control, a little bit under responsibility as well, makes sense, yes? Nothing wrong with using the same terminology across both. User focus comes down to that collective benefit, making sure that the indigenous peoples determine the benefits that are used. Same thing as well under responsibility, ensuring data of interest are findable by communities. So that's that user focus there. Sustainability, ensuring that indigenous peoples determine the benefits as well. That was one that they had said was a little difficult to map out in this, but building the relationships was critical in her webinar. So building those relationships between the peoples and their data to use it appropriately and well. And then finally, technology. You don't see that heavily in here except for under collective benefit and that fund the training and education. So that does involve some technology in there as well. There's a full mapping in the article that is provided, and I'll give you links out there. And this is work ongoing. There's always work to be done, as we all are aware. So thanks for that interest there. So just wanted to briefly share what they wanted us to make sure the points were given. I am in no way giving the justice that the care principles should have, and I recognize that. But I certainly want you to engage and look at the organizations and their case study that they presented to us individually. With that, I want to turn it over to Mickey, who's going to talk about EOSC and Eden. And so, Mickey, I am going to, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. All right, so if you go to the next slide, that'd be helpful. All right. Thank you very much. So for EOSC Eden, EOSC Eden is an EU project, a 3-year project. It started in January of last year, so we're just in the beginning of our second year. Eden stands for Enhancing Digital Preservation Strategies at European and National level. So it's a project that is very much focused at the digital preservation aspect of things. There's a sister project, Fidelis, which is looking at the repository side of things, so more of the user-facing services offered, whereas Eden is very strongly focusing on the digital preservation aspect of things. The project was also invited to fill out a use case and gave a use case presentation. So many people, and us included, thought, "Oh my God, what can we say about a project and the trust principles? How does that even relate?" Many folks would look at trust principles as something more or less describing services or repositories or archives itself. But I mean, the care principles managed to do a solid mapping, so I think any project should do a solid mapping as well. And at the end of the day, the words behind trust, much like the words behind fair, are just conversation starters. Trust in itself is not a certification framework. It's not a maturity model. It's not a checklist in itself even, but it's something that is there to give us an idea of common strands to talk about. And we took that invitation to map the trust principles to the project. So on this first slide here, you see a mapping of the trust principles to the project outcome overall. I will dive into the core preservation processes in a minute, but let's focus on this for a second. So for transparency, I mean, any project is that sets out to clearly outline what it is that they do and be very transparent about project quality and management. That happens within the project itself. So there's a link here to the deliverable that outlines this, and I think this maps nicely to how any kind of repository or archive is responsible for documenting their quality measures and their procedures as well. For the R in responsibility, personally, I think this for me is always the hardest one to map because it kind of sits between transparency and user focus. It outlines very much of you taking on the responsibility of data for a specific community. So within the Yosk Eden a project, that is done by making sure by partially by the project quality and management handwork outlined above, but also by the next point, which looks at the discipline-specific environments and making sure that the outcomes that we have within that project actually align with those two. So that brings us to you for user focus. The frameworks and services that we are developing within EOSC Eden are piloted as part of the project. We have 7 piloting disciplines represented in amongst the 16 partners of the project. And anything that is developed within the project is tested against those disciplines. And then in a second step, the testing cycles through pilot methodology is also open up to a wider community feedback. So we're very much trying our best to ensure that the outcomes are user aligned. The S for sustainability goes back to what every project should do, right? Sustainability planning within the EOS context. The question is, of course, always how sustainable can project outcomes be? But this is something that was baked into the project proposal from the start, and we're tasked to look at that from the start. And T for technology, EOSC Eden is developing a registry and services to harmonize automated process and support interoperability. And there is a webinar. It'll be our third EOSC Eden webinar coming up in April on April 8th. So please join that if you're curious to hear more about the registry and services being developed. So if you would go to the next slide, please. Right. So anyone who's heard me speak anywhere within the last year has probably seen the image on the left. I keep on talking about this and the core preservation processes a lot, but a lot of what we do within EOS Eden is kind of tailored around or built around this framework called the reuse fitness framework. And the idea of the basic framework is that if you as a repository archive take on data, you take on that data for a specific group of users, existing users as well as future users. In digital preservation speak, that is the designated community. And you kind of know how you expect that designated community to interact with the object. Like what do you expect them to do with it? And that is called the preservation objective in digital preservation speak. So everything that you do needs to kind of orient itself against that top bar. Um, then how do you evaluate that? Any kind of data can be broken down into different quality layers. There's contextual data quality. So is the data reproducible? Is it of scientific high value? Is it adequately documented? There's a technical data quality. Is the file format encoding okay? Is the bitstream integrity there and so forth? And metadata quality means that is everything in sidecar documentation there that we required to understand and find that object within a catalog or repository. And those different quality measures and the community and usage scenario that we're kind of saving it for needs to make sure be supported by trustworthy digital capabilities. So by what you actually have implemented in your repository. So through this framework, we're looking to be able to answer specific questions, such as how and based on what are objects selected for long-term preservation, what makes an object preservable and reusable, and also what processes does a trustworthy digital archive need to include. That brings me to my last slide, which focuses very much on this bottom bar, the trustworthy digital archive capabilities, and those are the core preservation processes. It's the first milestone that was published last year. The link to the Zenodo documentation is included here. And this is actually an actionable piece of work that can help you to enhance or to realize trust principles in some degree within your own processes. And how can that be done? The T for transparency, the documentation is there, and you can use the documentation and reuse it. It's 30 different processes that we describe. You can kind of just pick and choose them, walk through them, and see which of the documentation you have in place, or whether you want to extend your repository and preservation capabilities to support specific processes, like, for example, file format identification. If you don't have that in place yet, you can look at the description, see what it's all about, and reuse it. Responsibility again brings us back to the top one with a designated community. So the for whom am I doing this and the preservation objective for what? You need to know that. You need to know for whom you're doing this and for what. And the core preservation process can help you think about that. The user focus are the quality metrics, the three pillars in the middle. This is something we're currently developing. It's a milestone that will be released in the end of June with a quality metric. And that will have to, of course, outline things that are already supported by your core preservation process that you have in place. Sustainability, the management is kind of outside of the idea of the core preservation processes. That's something that core trustee certification and other maturity frameworks look at. They make sure that you have staff and money to take care of all this. This is a bit more of a nerd-focused piece, the core preservation processes. But we do look at sustainability management of digital objects itself. So we more look at processes that help you mitigate and extract risks for digital objects, such as those relating to file format obsolescence. And lastly, T for technologies, the core preservation process descriptions, they're written in a technology agnostic way, but they do, of course, formulate clear expectations. For example, that checksums have to be created in your system to ensure integrity and when they are to be created. So that's kind of the end of a short mapping of where we're at within EOSC Eden against the trust principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. I appreciate going through those slides. I want to pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions or comments for Mickey. I know they'll be happy to answer anything. If you're welcome to put them in the notes, you're welcome to put them in the chat. You're welcome to come and take yourself off mute and have a conversation with us. There'll also be time for discussion at the end. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So how about we move forward? Thank you again, Mickey, for that. And now we're going to move into our use case example from a repository, the Digital Repository of Ireland. Beth is a senior program manager of research and engagement, and she'll share more with us on DRI. Beth, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Advance to the next slide. Okay, so very briefly, for those of you who don't know me or the Digital Repository of Ireland, we are a national repository that caters to the cultural heritage sector as well as the humanities and the social sciences. So we have a real mix of data that comes from research and comes from research in different types of institutions like higher education institutions, as well as research from within cultural heritage organizations, as well as typical collections you would associate with museums, archives, libraries. We are a member-based organization, so most of these organizations, the higher education institutions or cultural heritage organizations, join DRI and then they get support through their membership to deposit. And then we run a couple of schemes. Every year we run a community archive scheme where we give low and no funded organizations an opportunity to deposit outside of that paid membership scheme. We are a Core Trust Seal certified repository, and we've actually been certified 3 times already. We just renewed our certification again just at the end of 2025, so made that announcement in January. We're a FAIR enabling repository. We've always seen the FAIR principles as really core to our work, even when it comes to dealing with the cultural heritage side of things. We see that as applicable across the board. And in the same way, I think we see the trust principles as applicable across the board. We've been around for about 10 years now, slightly less with actual data in the repository, but at least 10 years that we've kind of existed as an idea and with some staff. And in that time, I would say that alignment with certification and emerging principles was really vital to communicating not just to our end users, what value there was in the repository and in using a repository like this, but to ensure that we understood across the organization, across different staff members who come from different professional backgrounds, what it was we were delivering. I think the repository space now is becoming a little bit more coalesced around what it is we do and how we best uh, deliver data to support the FAIR principles. And the trust principles are part of the reason why it's all starting to make sense that repositories are operating in similar ways. We were a signatory to the trust principles very early on. We had actually already been certified at that point, but we saw the trust principles as being an important step to help other repositories towards certification, which we saw as important. And it also seemed like another good way to connect conversations across the repository. We used to have a lot more staff, contracted a little bit now, but when we first started out, there was, I think, 30 staff members at the DRI, and not everyone was going to be involved with the details of Core Trust Seal certification or understand really the nuance of digital preservation work or even really working in that preservation piece. So the trust principles was a way, again, not just to kind of communicate outward focus to our users, but to communicate across the organization what it was we thought we were doing in this repository. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so I have outlined what we submitted in our use case example to this working group, how we think we align our repository work with the trust principles. And when I was copying these over into the slides, I sort of condensed them a little bit. And I realized I probably condensed transparency a bit too much. We do a lot more than just share our operational policies, but I do think that that is a big and important piece to transparency, that it's not just about being transparent about who deposited to the repository and how you support digital preservation, but making sure that anyone can access the nuts and bolts of what it is you say you're doing when you are holding data on behalf of the public good. The responsibility piece, we really kind of narrowed down on some of the metadata pieces. Metadata is validated against community supported standards. So for instance, in the cultural heritage sector, there's a number of metadata standards that are widely used, and we make sure that the metadata aligns with those standards. At least at ingest, and then we periodically validate the metadata as well, provide a range of supports to ensure that high quality metadata is captured, i.e. we give instructions to our members about how best to utilize the structure if they're depositing either using the web interface and typing right into the repository, or they're using our batch ingest process. We have a lot of documentation, guidelines, there's individual support that they can access from our staff as well. Changes to metadata and data are tracked. Objects are versioned on disk. We use digital object identifiers. All digital objects must have both a rights statement and a license applied. All data and metadata is available for export by the depositor and depositor-defined user groups. A lot of these things are going to be things that most repositories are doing, but again, we are doing them, I think, because things like the trust principles exist. Next slide, please. Okay, so user focus is a huge part of DRI's work and something that we are now shifting, I think, even more towards. Our users have historically been our members. We thought about the supports that we offered to our member organizations as depositors bringing materials into the repositories, but we are now increasingly shifting towards an understanding of the importance of reuse and keeping data alive in continuing to make the case for the importance of cultural heritage. You have to kind of prove that it continues to have some relevance in society, that we're continuing to put this effort into preserving them. So we've launched a project, I'm kind of skipping down my bullet points there, called DRI Labs, which is really going to focus on how can we build better end user engagement with the material in the repository. But we also have a training and engagement program that focuses on members, and we do have webinars that are externally focused as well. We have a biennial conference, which I would invite anyone here to come and participate in if you're interested. It's happening in June in Belfast, and the theme is going to be focused on play in digital preservation. And it angles a little bit more towards the arts, social sciences, and humanities, but it's broadly applicable to digital preservation work in any field. Sustainability, DRI, we are very lucky that we are funded via a service level agreement with the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science, DFERIS in Ireland. And we are also located at 3 partner institutions that are long established and well respected, that have expertise in key areas that we work in, which are archiving, repository infrastructure, and the domains of research that we support. So I'm located at the Royal Irish Academy. Several of my other colleagues are at Trinity College Dublin and Maynooth University. So 3 well-established universities within Ireland. We also have a very open governance. We have a board, we have a management team, and we have an expert advisory group that was founded in 2021. Next slide, please. And then finally, the technology piece. We follow a lot of processes that are well established in the cultural heritage domain and in digital preservation more broadly. Data is preserved using archival information packages stored in a central database and actually replicated across servers at those various institutions that I mentioned. The integrity of deposited assets and metadata can be checked against stored checksums. Results of these tests are available to the user. So users, our membership, can actually check on their own checksums if they want to as well. That's not something that they're required to monitor, but they have access to that information. The repository was custom built using a number of community standards. And actually, if you like our repository, you can download it and launch a version of it yourself. If you go to GitHub, it's entirely open source. Metadata and data are shared via the Open Archival Information System standard. So that means that we can exchange with Europeana platform for cultural heritage materials or various other metadata aggregators. So to kind of sum up here, the main benefits that I think we see to being more transparent about this work, which, by the way, sorry, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, all of these data points are now in our use case that we have submitted to this working group, but they're also published on our website. We have a page where we say how we feel like we align with the trust principles, and we will update that periodically. It helps to better communicate to our membership who are entrusting us with the long-term preservation of their data. And again, that wider general public user base who are interested in whether or not the data that they find in our repository is going to be understandable and still there when they go back to look for it, 10 years later, and remembering that, oh, there's something there that I wanted to find again. So some of the key benefits that we've kind of pulled out in our reflection on why the trust principles turned out to be so valuable for us is that it helps to explain the repository benefits to a wider community. I think, like Mickey said, trust makes sense. It's a word you can use that immediately kind of frames the conversation in a way that's different from certification. And it allows more people to, I think, ask open questions about, well, what does trust really mean? It's very useful in education and outreach, and it helps to position us as different from some other platforms and spaces that people could deposit their data. One maybe particular example here is that we were starting to collect 3D data, again, from the cultural heritage sector. And we had a viewer in browser where you could render the 3D data, although it depended on kind of what file formats you were depositing. And there's another widely popular platform called Sketchfab, where a lot of organizations could very easily upload their 3D data. Why would you choose us over Sketchfab, especially if we were both free, which Sketchfab no longer actually is? So that kind of helps to, again, make it more useful to explain what are the services that we're really offering. Justification of the quality of work. This is where we can go back to our funders and say we need to spend time supporting these services and digging into the details of maybe the complexity of some of these file types like 3D data because it's important to our users. And also it is necessary for us to maintain the quality of the work that we're doing. There's external feedback on areas for improvement. It opens up that conversation. And it just ensures that we're continually aligned with community standards. If we participate in conversations like this, we get to find out if how we're interpreting the trust principles are actually how other people think that maybe we should be interpreting the trust principles. So we get to have a broader conversation, not just across the organization, but with the broader community. All right. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate your time, and I really appreciate that you maintain an entire page to share with the community on and update it on the trust principles. That's wonderful. Thank you.
I'll,
Um,
I'll link that
uh,
in the chat too. Sorry.
oh, that would be great. Thank you so much. I welcome questions for Beth and DRI. Do we have anyone like to speak up or ask any questions at the moment? We're a little bit ahead schedule. All right, so I know.
Uh,
Yahweh, please.
I have a question. Yeah, thanks very much, Beth, for the excellent presentation. And so the one thing that you mentioned like struck me that like the DRI is not just strive to be a trustworthy repository, but also want to be a example for the repository probably being formed yet. And that's actually was that is a very much what the intention the trust was created in the first place. Like it's not for just the mature repositories. Um, so I'm curious that for that effort, are you guys that actively uh, working with some new repositories or people want to build a repository or uh, pretty much like you have the documentation or guidance like for people to follow. So how do you engage that activity?
That's a really good question. I think one of the main ways we see ourselves as kind of promoting digital preservation across different types of organizations, including repositories, is our biennial conference. It happens every second year, where we get to talk and frame the conversation around digital preservation with what our values are and how we're engaging with digital preservation. We do host a variety of webinars, one of which is going to be coming up with, I think, one of the members of this working group. I don't think it's actually on our schedule yet, but it's going to be happening in late April, where we're going to be talking about DRI's use case for the trust principles. It's Charlotte is going to be joining us and talking about the work in here too. So we're amplifying these conversations within Ireland and inviting along those who are participating in creating repositories. There's a new open repositories group that's just started within Ireland, which we are going to be participating in, although I don't think we're necessarily taking a guiding role in that group, but we do want to help to support and answer questions. We've put out blog posts and kind of documentation around our Core Trust Seal certification process so that people can find out how it went, like our opinions on how why certification is important and how we've done it. And I feel like there's probably a few other. We're hosting a couple of visiting repository owners, people who are setting up a repository from Malaysia to talk about how to set up repositories. But these are all like I can't I can't say that that one we actually cultivated. That one they came to us because they must have heard that we were here to talk about our experience with certification.
Great question, Dawei. Thank you, Beth, for that answer. Hugh, please go ahead. Good to see you.
Oh, sorry, folks. Hang on. I'm on the wrong camera. Hi, Beth. Thanks so much for that talk. Um, again, apologies for asking a fairly naive question here in terms of the trust principles, but it's interesting that the user part of that seems to be very much focused on providing training and explanation, explaining where you're at and so on. Was there a kind of conscious decision to do that? and not talk about, discussions with stakeholders or things like that?
Oh, you mean in terms of what I've outlined there?
Yeah,
Maybe can we just go back a slide and we'll pull user focus
yeah,
up there?
please. Thanks.
Maybe one or two slides, I can't remember. Yeah, okay. So our user focus has largely been on our membership. So historically, we thought of our members as also our users of the repository. So a lot of the work that, and when we talk about users, we're kind of using member and user interchangeably. And it's only been recently that we've started to think, well, wait a minute, actually, there's a lot more users than just the members. So we are expanding our training and engagement program to also kind of more include that general public. We've got the DRI Labs project, which is inviting people to propose ideas to reuse data in the repository. We've also now got a data reuse award that we're offering to showcase examples of how people have reused data in the repository. But I would say actually, probably some of the things we've got under sustainability could also be replicated under user focus if you're thinking about having stakeholder conversations, in that our expert advisory group gives us that broader international and national stakeholder perspective. The DRI board brings in that stakeholder perspective. And it's very much a two-way conversation there. They get to tell us what they think we should be doing, and we get to report on how we've met those expectations or how we've adapted and gone in different directions. Uh, but you're right that like there's a lot of overlap in different categories and a lot of different ways that you can frame answering the question about user focus or answering the question about sustainability. And I think when I first started talking here, I realized transparency I'd reduced to one bullet point. And there's lots of stuff that we're doing in here that also contributes to transparency. So it's even even me trying to summarize what it is that I think the organization is doing to support the trust principles is probably not a complete picture of what we're actually doing to support the trust principles,
Cheers.
or what everyone across the organization thinks we're doing to support the trust principles.
Excellent. Thank you, Hugh. Mickey, please.
Uh, I'm curious if because I just looked at your page and I love the mapping that you did. If you actually used the trust principles when talking to your advisory board or upper management or someone to better sell the value of what it is that you do and the rationale behind it, and if you've gotten any feedback on that.
Ooh, okay, so I'm not involved in all of the DRI board and management conversations, so I probably can't answer historically how the trust principles may have been involved in lots of different decision making. But I can answer that the trust principles were leaned on in the excuse to start DRI labs. I mean, it's not the only excuse, but it helped to support the fact that the labs is not just this kind of fluffy project about, drawing attention to the repository and getting people excited about, making GIFs out of pictures that they found in historical collections. It's also about establishing a better relationship with our users around what it is that we do and why it is so important and how they can ask questions about what we do, how they can better understand, how we can better communicate what it is that we do. That onto the DRI Labs project page because I don't think I've made that statement there.
Maybe if
Okay.
I can briefly add one thing to that. I think that's a very important point because trust is very much a two-way street. I think it's not just something that we can take as a repository archive to cross-check our own capabilities and grow them, but it's also kind of a marketing tool that we can use to sell what it is that we do and to explain it to other people, right?
Yeah, I actually do think, from my perspective, my role at DRI is research and engagement. So I also, if my colleague Aileen, who is the one who led our CTS certification, was here and was talking about the trust principles, she might lean a little bit more heavily into some of the functionality and technology and the way it's affected policies and how actually we do define what and how things get preserved and how we talk about preserving things. Whereas I'm definitely more focused on the how does this allow me to talk about what DRI does and the importance, and to use that as a feedback mechanism, because we are always interested in knowing what people want from us. And I don't know if that's particularly an inheritance from cultural heritage, where those organizations are constantly in dialogue with the public around, not just we're preserving stuff for the public. So we want you to come and look at these cultural heritage materials and make use of them and have them have meaning in your life today. But we also want to know how you think about how we are communicating things back to you. That dialogue is very present in that sector, which is maybe not the case in all fields of research, where you researchers, there may be very contained circles of dialogue that are very open, but not necessarily aimed at the public. And I think scientific communication, there is a working group here or an interest group or a working group here in RDA that is focused on the importance of actually being able to communicate what's happening in all fields of work to the general public.
Excellent. Thank you. That way, please.
So I have a question for Mickey. I I, I also see a trend. I think the trust principle was created for repositories, uh, but it seems like the services are also apply trust principles. Um, I wonder if you see when you kind of do that mapping and talking with other people, is that kind of the case that we could think about that maybe expand the application of trust principle a little bit, beyond the repositories
Beyond the repositories to
to
our-
like so maybe like say it beyond the like say a starter to kind of just create a new repository, but maybe create the new services evoke.
yeah,
Yeah.
Certainly, I think that they can be, you can use the trust principles to start your own repositories. You can use them much like the FAIR principles. I mean, most people don't start out of nowhere and say, ooh, let's set up a service. They already have something in place. They either already have data that they're handling in some way and they want to build a system around it, or they have a system that they want to extend. So I think trust is, in my personal opinion, at least, a conversation starter for these people. And it
Mm.
can be a conversation starter on three different levels. It can be a conversation starter on operational level, where you kind of try to extract from the trust principles, like the original paper, what it is that you need to think about. Can also be a conversation starter with your management to say, look, I have this, but I need to expand it in a specific way, much like the NDSA levels of preservation for a preservation, like they're not really very highly sophisticated maturity model, but they give you an idea of where to go next. And I think trust principles can do that even on a more basic level, where you can, for example, say, look, I have processes, but T says transparency. So we may need policies to make more visible what it is that we do. So I think it can be used as an internal conversation piece between operations and the management. And the third use case or level it could be used for is a conversation between the repository and the outside world to kind of communicate and showcase what it is that you do in a more understandable way. Because what a lot of repositories or archives, I mean, you can use the terms interchangeably, what they do and try to sell it to their stakeholders, may those stakeholders be their users, external funders, or someone else, it's very hard to explain. And a short thing like trust, if you flesh it out right, I think can have a similar success like Fair. Fair faced, in my opinion, at least again, similar problems where you can theoretically associate anything with fair. So it's much to you linking what those words mean to the actions that you have within your services.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Great discussion. We certainly welcome others if there's a question. I see we have a comment in the chat about it being difficult sometimes following the principles and engaging the stakeholders. and explaining those responsibilities. Does anybody want to, Beth, I don't know if this is a question you would like to answer, Mickey, from your perspective as well. Is there anything from the services side? Or really make a comment on the comment. I don't think it's a direct question, so certainly welcome any feedback.
I can, oh, Mickey, did you want to take this?
I was just going to say that it very much comes back to what I said earlier, that for you, you need to be clear on first, decide what you want to use the trust principles for. Which stage are you at? Are you at a stage where you're looking to expand your capabilities? Are you at a place where you're looking for a conversation internally within your organizations or within the external world, and then kind of shape it and how to use it? I do think, though, a question connected to that is that more guidance on how to use the trust principles and more examples in a clear, understandable way would be beneficial. So I kind of read that contextually in your question. I don't know if that's correct. That's all I had.
Thank you. Ingrid, please.
There we go. Yeah, thank you, Meredith. Well, in the context of this discussion, I was thinking maybe I can throw in another use case example of the trust principles, which is again a little bit different. And that relates to another European project that we have running at the moment, which is kind of a sister project of the EOS Eden project that Vicky just talked about, and it's called Fidelis. And in that project, we aim to create a European network of trustworthy digital repositories in the context of the European Open Science Cloud development in Europe. And we have been thinking really hard about, this network needs to be a network of trustworthy digital repositories. So trustworthiness is quite central. But on the other hand, it also needs to be inclusive, because the aim of this network is very much to facilitate knowledge exchange, to create a stronger unified voice for the repositories in Europe in the EOS context, but also, to further professionalize repositories, to provide training and support, etc. So it needs to be inclusive, but the T is prominently there. So how do we solve this issue? And then we decided to really fall back to the trust principles as, let's say, the threshold for repositories to get provisional membership. So that means that repositories that want to be part of that network we ask them to endorse the trust principles via the RDA. And we see that very much, as to a certain extent, a low threshold when you think about trustworthiness, but it also provides, like Mickey was saying, like the conversation starter. It's seen as a kind of a declaration of intent that the repositories that we get in the network support these principles and are willing to work, on their own levels to further professionalize. So I think that is another example of how the trust principles can be used. And I'll put a link to Mickey is already there. Thank you very much, Mickey. A link to further information in the chat.
Thank you, Ingrid. Appreciate that, and good teamwork there, Mickey.
I'm struck by a lot of parallels, I realize, Ingrid, with what you were just talking about with the Fidelis network, and on a very much smaller scale, what DRI is doing with its
sure.
members. We were also kind of networked organizations. And in a lot of ways, by contributing to DRI, they are facilitating trust for their community, their designated communities, for their materials in ways that they maybe don't fully understand, but they understand the importance of, well, we've joined DRI because we want to ensure that we are aligning with trust. And one step is giving DRI the materials, but the other steps are following along the training, trying to describe the materials as well as possible, understanding what it is that we are doing and where the gaps are in what we're doing and what they could be doing separately. So it just, in a lot of the ways that the trust principles would be valuable, even as a declaration of I understand generally what this concept means, and I want to work towards trust and trustworthiness. That that's a huge first step for a lot of organizations that don't necessarily have the in-house expertise or the funding to operationalize, you would say, the trust principles right out of the gate, or to meet that higher level of certification.
Yeah, I just want to have a quick comment on Ingrid, the suggestion of the use case. I think I did not realize that the thinking behind Fidelis. I mean, we see that there is a couple of days, every couple of days, like there is a new repository endorsed trust principle, and I think actually it is very fundamental, like for large networks like Fidelis, and if some language can be used to help the communication among them, I think is very useful. I think that's actually a great perspective for trust principle to go further.
Okay. I see some great ideas for the breakout rooms beginning to form, some potential conversations to have. I want to thank our presenters for sharing their use cases. There is an opportunity for others to provide use cases, and I'll share that link later on. We'll be continuing to collect these through time. Now, before let me change slides here. Beth, thank you again for the discussion. Mickey, thank you for sharing EOSC. Now we're going to talk about our breakout sessions, the meat of our conference today. What we're going to do here is we're going to break out into different sessions, different breakout rooms. But first, let's talk about how we're going to do this, right? So I'm going to review quickly the 4 different breakout rooms that we'll have. One of them will actually end up being our main room. Each room should elect a note taker. We will have trust working group members in there, but it can be anybody. It doesn't have to be them. So we'll need some note takers to be able to report back at the end of the breakout session. So it'll be about 30 minutes. I'll give a 5-minute warning to folks when we're getting close so you can wrap up your thoughts and conversations. And it's okay, again, if there are multiple people writing in this document. It's more about capturing the information. You'll see in those collaborative notes that I'll repost here in just a minute before we break out that I have a spot that says go below for each of the different breakout rooms. So actually, I'll go ahead and put those community notes if you don't have access to them yet. Thank you, Hugh, for sharing them earlier. I'm sharing them again just in case you didn't get in there. So the content of the following slides that I'm going to walk through quickly have already been populated in the community notes. So no stress, don't worry about taking all the notes as I walk through this quickly. I just wanted to help you understand the different groups that we're going to have so that you can see which one may be the best fit for you. There, we will start with the first one of, are you new to trust principles? So, questions to consider, and this isn't what you have to consider. These are just starting thinking points. What makes a repository trustworthy? Does trust principles equal trustworthiness? Do the principles show differently for repositories versus data services? I think we've already started that conversation. And then how can I get help in working with the trust principles? So that's the first group. So that'll be breakout group 1. Then we'll go to the next one, breakout group 2, which is how can the trust principles help you? Again, these are questions to consider. And again, we were talking about signing on and endorsing the trust principles. Have you done so? If you haven't, see the link. Do you feel confident in talking to all the different stakeholders that you have? And then the challenge of give one sentence on what you'd say. And how do they differ amongst the different stakeholders? And then finally, another question is, have you considered discussing these principles in your sustainability plan in all the different ways that that comes apart? What other policies, documentation in government's documents do you incorporate these principles into? Because that's a big way to be able to show what you're doing. Now, where would you like to see trust go next? So I have a very easy opening question. Easy is, not really the best word, maybe. To better ensure my data repository or data service is trustworthy, it would be great if I had. So, what is it that you need in your instance to better explain, use, support that operationalization of the trust principles? Is anyone interested in creating a new working group with a different goal, or how could you expand upon this working group? I know there's others out there. What's next? What could you see being next for the trust principles? And then what other groups are working on or incorporating? So that's what we'll talk about. So you can talk about some of those other groups that are out there that are actively engaging in this. And then the final group, and this will actually stay in the main room. We're going to talk about some of the resources that we have available and get feedback. So the notes, you'll be able to make comments directly in the links on the PDFs, that sort of thing. And I have 2 slides of just ideas here. So we have a list of presentations out in Zenodo, and this is the actual Google sheet of all the different presentations. Now, this is since 23, and I do have to admit we're missing a few from the last, I'd say, quarter. But we can certainly add those in. But that's something to look at to see, are there slides in there that you could reuse? Is there anything there of purpose that could support you? We have a working group Zotero collection of 320 plus articles, and WDS IPO, we're maintaining that, and we're searching and updating that library on a regular basis. We do it about quarterly. So just to share that with you, just so that you know that there's a resource available for you. The use cases. So if you wanted to supply a use case, there's the template. Maybe Fidelis would want to create a use case to share with us. And then there's also the list of use cases that are out there already. And we will see DRIs as a part of that. So thank you again, Beth, for that. And then we do have a checklist, and this is a draft ready for community input. It is a PDF, but please make comments, additions, use the rolling notes, the community notes to give feedback on that. And then one thing also is that WDS, the scientific committee, had agreed to supporting the trust working group, and I link the co-chair proposal there. This is from Nikki Dawe and I. It's about how to make sure that there's a contact point for the trust principles. We're in no way trying to take away from RDA and their efforts in maintaining the endorsement and the starting of this working group in the history. It's just making sure that there's someone available to maintain the literature, continue to collect and share and educate others on the trust principles. So that is also available for comment from others. So that's where we're at. What's going to happen next is we are going to go into breakout rooms very shortly. You will get to choose which breakout room out of the 4. And then after about 30 minutes, we will come back and give a summary. Make sure to take great notes. Make sure you have somebody who's taking notes and somebody who's willing to talk. Don't spend a whole lot of time on figuring out who that is. Just take a few minutes at the very beginning. And then remember, there's the link to the breakout discussion in the community notes. Before we launch the breakout room, are there any final questions from individuals? And do you have any questions on how we're moving forward? Okay. Seeing none, I hope that our lovely RDA colleague will go ahead and launch our breakout rooms for us.
Absolutely, Meredith. Yeah, just about opening them.
Thank you so much. Okay, so please choose which rooms you'd like to be at. You'll see that there's 3 listed, and if you want to stay in the community feedback, that'll just stay right here. So you can click your name and move off into a different room as you wish, please. Okay. Okay, so Mickey has got the trust principles. How can the trust principles help you? Dawei, will you be able to take care of the new to the trust principles by chance?
Yeah, I'm looking for how do I join the,
So if you go into here, let me do this. Can you see my screen? Can you see it on the screen?
yeah, yeah,
Click the join button to your right.
join button. I didn't see a join button.
On your breakout rooms, do you have this should have popped up in your window. And if you
Uh,
want, I can assign you. Would you like me to assign you
yeah, like assign me. Yeah,
to the new one?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Does anyone else need help?
Yes, hi, thanks for the presentations. I'd like to be in the breakout group 3. I can't see the join button anywhere.
That would be the where would you like to see trust go next?
Yeah, exactly that one. Please.
Okay, thank you. There you are.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Happy to
Uh,
help if needed.
Meredith, sorry, I'm in the same boat. Could I go to the New to Trust Principles group, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
Enjoy. Anyone else? We have 3 of you in here still. Certainly welcome you to engage in anything. You want to move to another room? Hi, Natalie. Would you like to stay here and talk a little bit about the different materials available?
Yes, I was planning on staying.
Excellent. Okay. Let me open some materials. That would probably be the most help. And the community notes. So what I'll do is I'll just drag this over here. All right, so we're going to look at the list of presentations first, if that's okay, if we just
Yep.
kind of roll down the list. Certainly welcome notes from everybody here. So what this is a collection of all the different materials that have been presented on from when we were just issuing the trust working group down till just about June 25. Um, and what this is we have a full citation. All of this is out there publicly available so that others can either watch it or download the presentations. Would you find this useful in any way?
Probably. Let's see.
And if you have comments, it looks like you're welcome to add comments to this if you wish.
Yeah, I would probably find this useful. I have a few that I think I'm going to be watching later this week.
Sure, please. And so this is it's an ongoing list. It does remind me that I need to make sure that our ones at the end of last year, we had one at International Data Week that we did in October. So that's the last one there. Any other feedback on this play? Are there other looking at conferences, events, and meetings that you would expect to see, like that trust should be talked about?
I don't see anything from iAssist or IDW.
Okay. Yeah, we did do IDW, and we can certainly do that again, but I assist, I agree. Here, I'll put that in here.
They seem like natural fits.
I agree. Okay.
Also, maybe like the DCC.
Okay.
Especially like part of the like how do I know it has a theoretically more of a curation bent, but there's still the how are curation services transparent? What are curators doing? This is and sustainability and technology kind of straddle it the repository, but also the people as
Okay.
well. So yeah, DCC could be a good one, maybe.
Excellent. Okay. added those in. I appreciate the comments. As you're reviewing through and you look at these are all open and available, if you think of other things, please add comments at any time. All right. Let's go into the Zotero group. This is a list of all of the articles that we pulled to perform a literature review on a paper that we're trying to wrap up this. And I'm going to move this into a different view, into the group library, because I think it's easier to see. I have a bunch of libraries, so we'll just kind of walk through so you can see the different articles in here. We did not include, if it's open, the DOI is there. This does include paywalled articles.
Okay.
If you are unable to find them, reach out to WDS specifically, and we might be able to support that collection. We probably have an article. This is also multiple languages. This is not just English. We did want to collect, there's some articles from Latin America in here that are in Spanish. There's some others in Portuguese, which is a good thing. It shows that the trust principles are going across the world, not just one specific language necessarily. So
Any
that's one
French
thing.
ones?
I do not think that there are any French. I think that there are some that are in English and in French, that come out of specifically of Canada.
That makes
But
sense.
I think that because we listed it as English because they did both, and I have a bias. I'm a native English speaker, so.
Yeah, it might be worth like if we have a language tag, tagging the French as well, because then since it is available, then those who don't read or who prefer are more comfortable reading French might when it's in for Francophone accessibility.
Oh, I agree. Actually, that's something we're working on. We have another article that World Data Systems working on to look at that.
Oh, qualitative data reuse in practice. That sounds fun.
Yeah. So there's some fun stuff in there for sure. And oops, there's a lot, and I could just keep scrolling. Right now, these are just organized probably by date more than anything. And some of these are also, there might be web pages, there might be more than just peer-reviewed articles, because we were trying to capture everything possible on the principles. So, and this is an ongoing activity, so this hopefully will change each time you come to visit it. So just see it as a resource available to you. And if
Excellent.
you do use it, please, by all means, share the Zotero collection with others. We like to cite each other, right? We give credit to the people that maintain things, but by being able to share that this is out here, others could learn of it as well.
Yeah. And then value increases, so there's more impetus to actually keep it going.
And I want to say we do allow the ability to make additions or suggestions to the collection. So we go back. Yeah, so you can join as a member at any time to get updates on it. And we certainly welcome that. My other colleagues and the co-chairs of this working group support that as well. So. Any other questions or comments on this collection?
My reading list got larger, but that's okay.
AI summarizes well at times,
They
right?
do. Yep.
Okay. Let's go down to the trust use cases. I have two links here. The first one is our actual use case template. So if you or anybody you know decide that, gosh, I really want to contribute and create a use case, we certainly welcome it. And here is the use case. We would ask that you create a copy of this. This is out into a shared open Google folder, and be able to, submit an item that way. So we do actually ask the question, and this is one Dawe worked on, where the repository is in its development, because is it helpful? One of the questions we had early on is it helpful at the introductory stage of building the repository out, of implementing the trust principles at that point, or is it better as it continues to grow and mature, um, using the trust principles to make sure that you've got everything that you need, just like you would with FAIR? Is it easier to start from the beginning or whittle away at it over time? Um, there's arguments for all cases. I think that sometimes the answer is it depends, and it depends also matters on staffing and the governance that is behind the repository.
Yes, being principled takes resources.
Yes. It shouldn't, but it does, right?
But it does. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, otherwise, because fewer resources means easier options, and that if you go easy, then that means that is your principle, I suppose.
Yeah.
But if you want
Yeah.
other principles, then path of least resistance, then that takes resources.
Yes. And that's part of what we're trying to capture, is what does that look like? That's the same conversation we actually have in certification. We had an interest
Mm.
group meeting yesterday on certification. What does it really take to become certified? Resources.
Yep. Yep.
So welcome feedback on this as well. You're always welcome to make comments. The working group had a lot of meetings walking through this use case. All of our information is available on the RDA website under the working group, all of our recordings, that sort of thing, if you'd like to see the how and why we came to this. But we certainly welcome others. And then I'm going to jump now to the repository use cases. This is the collection of the different use cases that we have at this time. And, here's DRIs if you're very interested in hearing what they said today. And then we have others as well. This can be either, as we had some individuals submit them as a PDF, just because it was easier for them to do so, and they felt like this was static and it's not going to change. And then others that wanted to make sure that they can add to it over time. This folder is not going away. We hope to be able to add to this over time. You'll see that the actual template it's actually a part of the background folder. So, and all the iterations of the template are stored in there as well. So if you're interested in seeing what others are, this is a collection that you can figure out how it works. So we talked about EOSC Eden being a service, but also Fair Data Services as a service, and we had some feedback from Fair Sharing
Yep.
and Re3 Data, and how the DROG working group, or the updated attributes for repositories lends support to the trust principles. So those are also out there as well. Some interesting, if there's pieces that you think that we should include more of, right? Let's write them down. Let's see what else we could have in here. Because I think that we need more, not less. This is a small capture in the last year, but it's very difficult to collect use cases. Just as
It could be, I know there are a lot of repositories talking about trust certification, but then a part of it is like, can or can't you? So even looking at maybe selling use cases if you can't go the full length of certification, like you don't have the resources to go through that full documentation, but still having um, this is how we still implement them to the best of our ability now. Because again, it is, with them being principles, you can still apply them even with your lower resource constraints. It's fairly, especially in, say, the open data, open research circles, resources are not overflowing. But but that doesn't mean that we still do stuff, right?
Yeah.
So recording how we implement them, I find, and making those available so other people can see, often sharing, this is how I creatively used the trust print or created, we put our creative hats on, saw someone else do this, and look, now three other people are also using similar implementation techniques because they didn't realize that was a possibility before.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So it's
yeah,
it's another learning tool. It's
another,
another.
yeah, another learning tool, a communication tool as well, and a way for people to say we might not be certified, but we still implement the trust principles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so furthering the breadth, I guess, or the applicability,
Mm-hmm.
but and potentially reach into, say, other, yeah, trust principles for a data repository
Mm-hmm.
look very different from, say, if a service that might go, for example, supporting active data, the,
Mm-hmm.
the how it looks is very different. And so there's a lot of talk of fair, not as much talk about trust, but
Mm-hmm.
where trust has really been taken up by the preservation community, but the active data community less so because things are still nebulous. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe, but that doesn't mean that they don't still apply. It
Sure.
just looks different.
Yeah,
So,
and that's one of the challenges we face is it's not a prescriptive trust working group isn't this is the only way it could be. That's what
mhm.
people want.
Oh yeah, it's easier to say the binary yes,
Yes, yes,
no.
no. But it's like, well, it depends. There's different flavors. There's different governmental policies. There's different funder requirements from country to country, from field to field,
Yeah.
right? In disciplines, we often see this as a challenge.
Oh
So.
yeah. Yeah.
So, different way to think about it. Yeah, that's one of the answers we've had to say too many times is, I'm sorry, there's not just one way to do this, but we're happy to walk through a use case with you.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's
just to
talk.
think, yeah, yeah, because I really that's what it comes down to. Any principle is a discussion, be it
Yeah.
fair, care, trust, being aware of it, being in tune to it, and trying to see how that trying is what matters to
Yeah.
in my mind. So okay. So that's the use cases there. So of course, again, all that's open. We welcome other use cases to be added in. Let's take a quick look at the principal checklist. So this is one that I hope individuals will open it up and mark it up tremendously. This has not had public eyes on it yet. This is actually a collection of, we did a survey in 2025. We closed it in 2025. And this is the answers of what people, how they showed transparency, responsibility, that sort of thing. So that's just to share that this is just the survey. It doesn't include any of the use cases. But I bet you, from what we heard today from the use cases, we will see some of that in here, I bet. So
Yeah.
let's kind of walk through this a little bit. So on transparency, now in the article, Dawei et al. From 2020, the guidance they give to repositories is what I placed up here to be transparent about specific services and data holdings that are verifiable by publicly accessible evidence. So that was what the guidance was to the data repositories. And so how do you show that publicly that you're doing that? Well, in your mission statement, the services like a service list, if you will, an annual report. It's interesting that some data repositories don't share past just what's out there. An FAQ, which
Mm.
is actually very helpful. Your terms of
Yeah.
use. That's one of those policies, and that's one of the first things that most people before they deposit or decide to deposit, they want to know what the terms of use are. Also heard it as the open access policy. So trying to include multiple things, which could actually technically be the same thing. And then the procedures and processes here, these were, again, using some of different language for some of the same things. But I have found that regionally we call things differently. So I
Yes.
could tell, so I wanted to be more inclusive in the language rather than saying, no, it's just this.
Yeah.
So I used all of the examples that we had. So when you're looking at transparency here, what did we forget? What would you want to see?
Possibly, are there links to presentations, or because often repositories are out communicating, this is what we're doing. So
So almost like a communication and news area,
yeah,
maybe?
newsletters, because updates,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
um, because it's especially updates to services. So that could be a newsletter, that could be what's it called? Change log,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm. Okay.
things are more, again, that's technical transparency, but that still is like, we have made these changes for these reasons, bug fixes, but also new features. And how are those shared out? Trying to think what else we do.
All
There,
right.
yeah. So I guess what other policies are there? Like, so it could be
So,
policies writ large. I don't,
okay, yeah.
because I see terms of use in open access policy, um, but
And and then
sometimes
some
they're,
of this under the procedures could technically be policies instead of procedures. But really
yeah,
what happened is that procedures, processes, and down below under technology, people are asking for the actual workflows so that they can
yeah,
understand.
yes.
So, okay.
Yeah, we're
So,
actually working on opening up our stuff. I'm a curation lead within a repository. So, and we're looking at actually opening up, so how do we curate? We do large data. I'm with
mm-hmm.
Furter. So if you know Amanda
Okay.
Tomei,
Mm-hmm.
then I
Yeah,
work
yeah,
with her.
yeah.
Yeah, so I work with her. We're in the
Oh,
same repo.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yay.
So, the yeah, and we're looking at opening up, so because Furter does large data. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we curate, thousands of files? So what do we
Well,
actually
there,
do to review and sharing some of those resources that we use? So, and have
did you
developed.
see that RDA does have a big data working group?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't know if you're in that, but that's definitely a resource to think about. So,
yes,
um, let's go into responsibility a little bit further. Thank you for the notes. I'll add these in. It's just easier to stay on the screen right now.
yep.
So some of the public documentation available, statement including adherence to standards, just as DRI created a web page saying we follow the trust principles, statements of responsibility, links to policies, again, more policies.
More
So
policy,
more
policy everywhere.
policies. Well, it just shows that you've thought through it, right?
Yeah,
And the governance, and I think that's half the battle.
yeah,
Um, Statement on the governance model and documentation. One of the things that I see is that a lot of folks don't explain that there's actually, it's more than just an individual sitting behind the machine, right? There's a whole group of people that are making these bigger decisions.
yeah.
And sometimes it's helpful to know who those are so that you understand the lens that they're bringing in.
And you get like between governance and who the team are, and then also what the policies say, it also provides continuity. Like especially
Mm-hmm.
policy, it's in part it has the twofold effect of what so other people know what we're doing, but also so we
Mm-hmm.
remember what we thought we would do
Mm-hmm.
last year, so that we're still doing it this year.
Yeah. I feel that. I feel that. I think we've all felt that at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they also it comes back to the what you're talking about, the contact information, having organizational chart, who are the people, but also the services provided. So if we know that Natalie does this, oh, I should reach out to her instead of Amanda because Amanda does this, and this is really what my question's about. It's easier for you. And honestly, from a communication standpoint, seeing info at whatever.org, it does not tell me there's a human behind that. You
It's
hope.
a blank wall.
You
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah.
But so that putting a name or at least a title
Yes.
with an email address helps tremendously.
Yeah.
So
Even a team name as opposed to info at helps.
yeah.
But
Oh yeah, definitely. And then so I broke this down in two. So this is the public documentation if they had this available, but also if they had services that they offered. It shows responsibility if they offer data services, which is much more than just we store and forget about it, right? And then whatever listed quality control measures. So those two services, even though we see that as part of any data repository, by offering those, it shows that you're trustworthy and it shows that you're responsible for that aspect. And if the repository isn't responsible for it, then it should be stated that this is on the depositor's requirements. They need to do that. And so having that who does what list comes in very, very handy. So who
yeah.
is responsible for which piece? Same thing with metadata. Sometimes you want it started, but then it's curated by others, and then it comes together and all agree on what the actual metadata is on the back end. Sometimes it's whatever the author submits, and that's it. It depends. It depends. Every
It depends.
repository,
Yeah.
it
And
happens
you have
different.
your reasons why, and we respect
Yep.
those. Yeah.
Yep. All right, user focus, ensuring that data management norms and expectations of target user communities. So knowing who your user community is helps tremendously, right? Because what do they
Yeah.
need? So
Yeah.
this one I broke into three. So the different services that are required, and again, you'll see at the end there, user service specific staff, having people to contact with the multilingual descriptions of data. So again, per the tagging we talked about earlier, that might be
Yep.
a piece there. Offering metrics. So not just it's been downloaded or it's been viewed, but also reuse metrics. And I've seen some really great examples to show that we've had this amount of data in all these different publications. Because the repositories funder loves to see that what they're doing is held in so many different peer-reviewed journals. So that was a fun graphic to see on a website.
Yeah.
Having a data catalog,
Yep.
meeting with researchers before submission, and that is truly a service. Sitting down and talking with them, not just holding their hand saying, here's 1, 2, 3 to do, but what are your questions? Because if you do that right the first time, I imagine time 2, 3, 4, 10, 12 down the road are a lot easier. It's almost like that individual training
Yeah.
and having multiple ways to look and find the data. So going back to the public documentation on the website, so policies, guidance documents, statements on how the community how the repository is aligned with the community. We're in space weather, and we know space weather follows this metadata. So
Yeah, or we're generalists, so we have general metadata, but we also see, so we're actually looking at going, okay, what communities are already like depositing a lot, and do they have
yeah,
extra metadata standards that we could be adding into our generalist stuff
yep,
to see if we can meet them better. Optional, so that then if you don't adhere, if you're not, say, in geography, you're not stuck with
mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of useless geography metadata. But
There
if
you
it
go.
works for you, then here you go. Make your stuff more findable.
There you go. Okay. All right. Well, we are about to close. We do have technology here. And I'm going to go back to
I would put open, so for sustainability,
mhm,
the like open tech, like the tech stack also should
mhm,
be sustainable. So there's the funding, and the staffing, which
mhm.
are both hard enough to do sometimes. But there's the stability of the technological pieces that go into the repository as well. Um, the like, are you using software that is well maintained and open, or are you bound to something and in a relatively stable community, or did you fork something off of GitHub that you found 5 years ago and hasn't been updated since? Like, what is your situation there? And
Mhm.
having that, I guess there's system maintenance, but the, yes, your, so open, um, yeah, open software tends to be helpful in this
Sure.
regard if you have the additional, like the development capabilities as well.
Agreed.
But at least
Nat,
yeah, the technological sustainability as well. What does that look like? What, do they change their services a lot?
sure.
Um, and are they changing in ways that you like, or are you going to have to migrate? And what is like, if you had to migrate, how bad would it be?
Well, thank you, Natalie, for those comments. I want to acknowledge that
There
we're,
is a technology, yes, and we're,
yes.
yeah.
Um, okay. I think if you have any further comments, Natalie, I welcome you to put them in the document or in the notes. I know that our breakout sessions have ended and we have everybody together and we're 2 minutes over.
Oop,
So
okay,
I want to thank
sorry.
everybody for, no, you're fine. Thank you. You had great comments. I've got a lot of notes. I welcome others to add in notes into the documents. I wonder if we want to do a follow-up webinar after the fact to go through the different changes, Mickey and Dawei, or if we want to do a brief one sentence on each of the group. What would be best to you? Any feedback?
Maybe I think a brief sentence from the group, uh, and then we can think about the next step.
Okay. So let's do, what about the new members? How did that go?
I think that went actually well. We kind of tried to answer all the questions that were raised. I won't summarize everything, but I think it was an interesting conversation about the difference between a repository as something which is forward-facing, accessing data today, and the long-term data preservation sort of issue is the thing that's there. And then some things about some ideas on help with working on the trust principles, WDS being a home for the trust principles. So I'll shut off at this point.
Thank you, Hugh. I appreciate the summary and I appreciate any of the notes that are available in the document. Next up, we were going to talk about how the trust principles can help you. Any one sentence update from anybody there?
I can do that. Yep. So we talked a lot about the endorsement and the signing on. 3 out of 5 who are present have endorsed them. And we talked a lot about potential hindrances to endorse them, that sometimes it's not clear who in your organization has the right to sign off on that, and that some institutions may want to actually sign off on it, can't. And then we talked a bit about how they can be used as an engagement tool with internal stakeholders as well, to especially promote and make visible what it is that you do as a repository manager or owner. And there's quite a bit of stuff in the notes. So.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Mickey. Where would we like to see trust go next?
So I went there and I was alone. So I left and joined Mickey's group. So, but the one thing that I would have liked to discuss is let's put it because the question was it would be great if I had. So I think the question is who is expecting my repository to be trustworthy? And whose expectations should we meet? So I'm working in the Fidelis project, and there we see several, let's say, trust authorities that have different expectations. So, for example, core trust seal. So then you are expected to have this active preservation aspect. And the EOSC Federation expects something else, and the grant agreement expects something else. So, for example, community endorsed, whatever that means. So, who is asking the question from me and my repository? So that's and I maybe and it's not necessarily easy. It could be maybe easier, but that's also what we are looking at in the Fidelis project.
Good question. Thank you for that. And I'll give a quick update on the community feedback. And I want to encourage everybody who's on this session to please go click through those links in the community notes and give us your feedback. One of the things we did was we looked at a couple of different documents. We looked at kind of the outreach presentations in Zenodo, some suggested places that should be presented at in the future. Talked about the Zotero literature collection and how we should tag the different languages that are available, because multiple articles are available out that are not just English necessarily. Access to the use cases and the template, please. We're always excited to accept another use case. Let's have a webinar and share that use case with others. So something to think about there, and some access to the other repository use cases that are available. We do have the principles checklist, and this is new and very excited to have some feedback. That's what you heard us talking about as we were coming in, as you were coming back into the whole room. I have a bunch of notes to add in for there, so grateful for that conversation. And then the final piece that we didn't get to is actually the co-chair proposal to the WDS Scientific Committee to maintain just having a live point of contact, and also resources available to maintain some of the items that have been collected. So that being said, I think, oh, I gotta find my screen. There we go. That's a good summary of where we're at. The next steps, Dawe, did you want to talk to this, or would you like me to go through it? I'm fine either way.
Yeah, please go through it.
Sure. So we want to go back through and incorporate the different suggestions and changes that we've received. We do have an early stage paper that we're trying to finalize to share with everybody. Your comments and thoughts will help us do better on that. And then we are preparing our final recommendation and outputs to submit for community input through the RDA process, which includes presenting to the organizational assembly. So that'll be happening in this year as well. Don't forget, you can sign on to the trust principles at any time, as we've talked about multiple times. So please don't hesitate to do so. If you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out to any of the co-chairs, Dahui Lin, Mickey Linlar, or myself, and we're happy to help you through it.
Great.
Thank you all for being here today. It's a pleasure to spend so much time with you, and I look forward to reaching out to you again soon.
Yeah.
Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.